For today's hearing, and our first submitter this morning is Mr. Alexander. Good morning, Mr. Alexander, and we have read your submission, and please just read or discuss anything you've got to talk to us about, and please especially just focus on those key issues to you as well to make sure we've clearly got those recorded. Thank you very much.
Morning panel, I'll do my best to do that. I'm not sure which submission you're referring to. My original submission I expect you've read. I did submit another one, a verbal one, which I'm about to present now.
Perfect, thank you.
So it's, okay. Well, thank you for hearing me this morning. Over the past few weeks since submitting on Te Pūtahi Ladies Mile plan change, I've been inundated with 50 or so emails from the Council, complete with links to large volumes of reading matter, no doubt all very informative if I had the time and inclination to read it all. I have tuned into the live YouTube link from time to time, and thank you for sorting out the problematic transmission of the first few days. The effort by Council staff to disseminate this material is commendable, but what layperson has the time to give to reading it all or the knowledge to understand it? It seems to me then that this whole process is skewed to the landowners and developers with their teams of professional advisors being paid by the hour who will be easily able to counter anything and whatever the average resident like me has to say on the matter. I'd like to talk a little bit about what the Wakatipu was like when I came to town compared to now, and how I and many other residents of my vintage and younger feel about the changes that have come about during my 38 years here. For most of the first 23 years of my time here, I lived on Crown Terrace. The zigzag was sealed, but from the lookout onwards, the road was gravel for our first few years. We lived on Glencoe Road, and its intersection with the Crown Range Road was a hard T intersection. During our time, the Crown Range Road was sealed and the Glencoe Road intersection was twice realigned to cater for increased traffic flow. For more than half of those 23 years, we drove to town to work each day, along Ladies Mile, with hardly a house to be seen on either side of the road. I recall that the Strain House, the vet, now a pet home I believe, the Jones House and Glen Panel were the only residential buildings visible on that stretch of road until 2-acre residential blocks were permitted for a few years in the 1990s. The Frankton Industrial Subdivision was starting up on the Frankton Flats, and the airport, of course, was in place. Otherwise, the Frankton Flats, like Ladies Mile, was productive farmland. I worked for a successful survey firm that grew and grew until about 2000. I couldn't stay in that environment of growth, pressure and to a certain degree of chaos anymore, and left to start my own business. I was becoming increasingly concerned about the looming large-scale developments, which even then I was not comfortable with. But pressure was mounting for more development. There was still plenty of residentially zoned land able to be developed, but new developers were hovering, and Remarkables Park and Lake Hayes Estate got off the ground. First big pieces of rural land in the district during my time here to be turned into housing. Jack's Point followed and then shot over country, a very poorly designed subdivision in my view, and Henley Farm not much better, and it goes on. Already our infrastructure is suffering from overload. Sewage treatment and water supply, to name a couple which have hit the headlines in recent weeks. Adding these issues together with roading and transport, I have no confidence in listening to or reading the experts' advice on how such problems will be overcome and catered for as we expand into the future. And further, when the Alpine Fault ruptures, or any other natural climate-related disaster, or even another financial crisis or pandemic occurs, I submit that the following emergency, which will result in this district, because of its enclosed nature and remoteness from main centres, will be magnified exponentially with the increase in development and the commensurate increase in population. The question I now ask, do the developers, planners and engineers of the day look back with pride at what they have achieved and the effect it has had on our district, or do they just look at their bank balances and not give a damn? And the councillors of the day, I know for a fact that some of them look back in dismay with the development that has occurred, and I recall how hard Councillors Lawrence and Goldsmith in particular, and others, fought to retain Ladies Mile as a rural entrance in the first district plan review. So what are you, the planners, councillors, the panel and engineers of today going to look back on in 35 years' time? Will you be proud of another 2,400 residential units on Ladies Mile, as well as a possible 800 I hear proposed for the Hutchinson block, and I've read of another 400 to 600 adjoining Hanson Road? Will you be proud of the congestion and sheer population density that will accompany these developments? And these potential developments will be on top of those already approved or planned or likely to occur on already residentially zoned land. Of course, the councillors may fob this recent boom in development off onto central government and the fast-track housing legislation and government directives of recent years. But I submit that the councillors need to stand up to central government, show a bit of courage. They too are residents here and represent all of us who live here, and not one resident I have spoken to is in favour of the seemingly endless future developments we currently appear to have to look forward to. My strong feeling is that the majority of residents do not want to see any further large-scale developments in the basin, but few have the time, knowledge, commitment or energy to oppose these proposals. Maybe the council should conduct a referendum to gauge the depth of feeling on the matter. Growth cannot be forever. We live in a finite planet, in a finite and beautiful alpine basin. I believe we're in a situation very similar to climate change, where the action to stop this residential expansion onto rural land is not taken now, it'll be too late. Maybe it already is. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alexander. Any questions?
No questions from me, but thank you for your time to come in today. Appreciate it.
This goes back to your comment in regard to all those other developments that are around the Queenstown Basin area.
Yep.
And we've had some discussions with various experts and others around capacity and just understanding how full of those. There's been developments that they've provided the land but not been built on or too far out. And I recall at the beginning of your presentation you said you were a past surveyor, so must have a bit of a feel for the industry.
Absolutely.
Do you want to expand on that just a little, whether there is sufficient capacity to meet the housing need outside of the Pūtahi Ladies Mile area?
I don't believe there is. I think it's more to do with the capacity of this basin to absorb people. And my feeling is if we're not at capacity now, we're very close to it. I know this might sound a bit NIMBY-ish and so on, but I try to not be a NIMBY. There have been comments recently even by tourism operators saying that they're not in favour of the Terrace Airport, for instance, because they're already running at capacity. I do note with interest that we're still accepting applications and granting consents to new hotels, and I think this is a backward step. I think we should try to limit what we've got here, because the experience for the people that come and visit us here it's going to be degraded because of the sheer numbers of people that are coming. And there are several ways to do that. Limit the construction of hotels. Don't allow any further expansion of the Queenstown Airport. Anybody that wants to really make the effort here, they'll get here without a plane flying in. And it's not just our problem, it's a world problem actually, but let's do what we can in our little piece of it.
And for my sins, I'm a tourist operator in Dunedin. It's my day job. And I know from our figures that if we hadn't had COVID, we would probably be 20 or 25% larger now as an industry. Where would that have gone if we hadn't?
Well, all I can say is thank God for COVID.
I have no more questions.
You know, honestly, the ski fields are now closing their doors, some of them, and Cardrona did this year. When they got up to a certain number, you go onto any of the walking tracks around here now, biking, things are getting pretty clogged up. You can't walk into a restaurant for a meal anymore, you've got to book weeks in advance. What we should be doing with housing is filling in sites like the old school with more of those apartment blocks, but I see there's been a hotel given consent to build in that space up on Frankton Road, on Gorge Road, which is a really backward step. That should be all residential blocks, apartment blocks. It's yeah, I don't know where we're heading, but the whole basin will be houses at the rate we're going.
No, thank you very much.
Gillian.
I have no questions.
Thank you. Ian?
Just like to follow on from your previous answers. We've been told that the average house in Queenstown now is now $1.7 million. All the capacity that might exist in places like Jack's Point and other locations don't have planning rules that stop people building 4 or 5 mega houses for well-heeled Aucklanders or Wellingtonians or Australians or others. And we're being told part of the argument for this plan change is a new zone that from the outset can contain rules that require developers to build houses at a different type of the market than what all the other locations you've said earlier seem to be A, doing, and B, seem capable of being forced to be doing. How does that sort of more affordable type of housing, not apartments, because that might appeal to some people. We've been told about people with young families that might still need a small patch of grass, that might need something like a terraced house. How does that get catered to if not for proposals like this? And to follow on from that, is your principal objection the location that's proposed for this housing or the density and heights envisaged?
Both.
Okay.
I'm really supportive of the work that the Housing Trust is doing. They've done a couple of developments in Arrowtown, which is my hometown, and I think that's really good. Yeah, it's just the expansion, the spreading out into the rural areas and stuff that, you know, I'm not trying to, although it probably sounds like it, I'm not trying to kill everything from any development in this district, but there's a lot of places, areas to be filled up with residential units and, you know, houses and whatever before we start pushing out into all that green space.
Okay, you referred to the Housing Trust. We're not involved in, but we are aware that the council has notified a separate planning process. I think it's something to do with inclusionary housing, which I think is part of the council's response. Am I right to connect that with your previous answer about that way of addressing housing issues rather than new housing areas?
I'm not sure what you're referring to. For instance,
Okay.
the Arrowtown, the new proposal for Arrowtown for 12-metre height limits and 3 residential units per section. Is that the initiative you're referring to?
If you're not aware of it, then it's not fair to ask your question. So I wasn't referring to that specifically, but we can just stop the question, and I appreciate you sharing your experience this morning.
Okay.
Then just briefly following on from that, are you aware of or familiar with the Queenstown Spatial Plan?
Yeah, just vaguely. You know, to be honest, I don't follow all that stuff closely.
That's
It's too much.
more than...
It's just too much stuff out there.
Yep.
It's like the internet. It's just information overload. But I don't know how else you go about getting the approval of the residents. It's all about the residents. You know, we don't like people coming in here saying, do this, do that, you know, subdivide Ladies Mile into thousands of sections and stuff. It's not what, we don't seem to have any part in the decisions, in this case, I think, forced by central government and that sort of thing, and it's...
But this one is actually a council-driven variation, so it is the council who has driven this variation, and there was a history of ad hoc, and there's ongoing applications for ad hoc subdivisions. So if you're not, and fair enough with the reading, one thing just to be sure about though, we have read everything. And it is a lot of material, and I discussed that yesterday.
I take the off there.
We're all over it, and you were worried about the potential for a skew towards maybe developers. Again, the council has initiated the variation. The council has had multiple experts present to us, and so there has been very much from the role the council's taken very much reflects, one imagines, wider community council policy linked to the spatial plan.
Okay, well, I'll have a look at the spatial plan, but my comment about experts is based on advice that's been given in the past that's proven to be faulty, and I can give an example of for instance, all the traffic roundabouts between Frankton Corner and out towards Ladies Mile. I understand they're all going to be turned into traffic lights now. You know, they were $5 million each, and they've turned out to be not successful and not working. I don't know that traffic lights are going to work either. It's just too many bloody cars. And that's just one example. So.
Yep. No, thank you very much, Mr.
Okay,
Alexander.
thanks for having me.
But thank you for coming in and for taking the time out of your day to present to us.
I want to pay my $9.50 parking ticket.
And drive home. Safe travels.
Okay.
Thank you.
Here, I'll give you the money for the car.
All right. You're going to pay it.
Yeah, I'll pay your part.
Now, Mr. and Mrs. Dobb. And we've got Mr. Devlin.
That's my summary and Matt and Joe's summary. Thank you.
This is probably what we've got online. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Dobb, and welcome back, Mr. Devlin. Over to you for your presentation. Thank you for coming in this morning.
Good morning, panel. I propose that I read my summary statement first. It's just 2 pages, and then Joe and Matt will read their statement, and then perhaps we could have questions for the 3 of us at the end, if that's suitable. So I've pre-circulated that statement. It's in front of you now. As you know, I'm Blair Devlin, and I won't read the first paragraph. And just to note, for the second paragraph, I just attended the joint witness conferencing for the one day where the site-specific submissions were discussed. So overview, I support the overall council-led master plan approach to the wider Ladies Mile area rather than having multiple individual landowners undertaking their own consent or plan change processes. I support the plan variation including land south of the State Highway, which includes a mixture of land that has some development already approved, e.g. Cocoa Ridge in progress, Queenstown Country Club, or vacant such as the Dobb family upper terrace. A comprehensive approach that includes the Dobb family land will help achieve the plan variation objectives, specifically creating an integrated urban environment. The site, 13 Ada Place, has an upper and lower terrace separated by an embankment. The upper terrace measures approximately 4,200 square metres and is physically disconnected from the Dobb residence on the lower terrace, and is now effectively a hangover from the former planning policy of QLDC, which was to deliberately keep urban development off the upper terrace at the Ladies Mile and try and hide away views of Lake Hayes Estate. A consent notice requires retention of the screen planting on the site. And figure 3 of my attachment shows a photo of that screen planting.
Just, I know you're reading through it, but one question I had on that was required. Is that required under a consent or
Yes.
an easement or?
Yes, so when 13 Ada Place was created by subdivision as part of Lake Hayes Estate, there was a consent notice put on the title.
Consent notice.
Yeah, requiring retention of that screen planting.
Thank you.
So the submission and evidence supported the upper terrace of the site being rezoned to either Te Pūtahi Ladies Mile Zone medium density precinct to align with the northern side of the Ladies Mile, or low density suburban residential zone to align with Lake Hayes Estate or the Queenstown Country Club. The approximate yield, excluding a 25 metre building restriction area under a MDR precinct zoning, is about 4 residential units, like that shown on the northern side of the Ladies Mile in the master plan, which is my figure 1 attached. Under the lower density suburban residential zoning, the likely yield is more along the lines of 2 residential units. As recognised in the Section 42A report, the current PDP rural zoning of the Dobb property is an anomaly. It is an isolated parcel of rural zoned land that even includes the residential unit located in Lake Hayes Estate. In my evidence, I stated why the Dobb Upper Terrace was land suitable for urban development as part of Te Pūtahi Ladies Mile. In particular, it provides a small amount of flat land in close proximity to the future urban centre and directly adjacent to QLDC reserve land. It provides for an extension of the active transport network to the east, and the walkability of the site will assist the plan change objectives for modal shift. It will create a more balanced streetscape with regard to building heights on either side of the Ladies Mile urban area, and a clear urban frame at the entrance to the Ladies Mile urban area. Can be readily serviced, and physical and legal access is available to the state highway, which is to have its speed limit reduced or the new road shown in the structure plan. It is not subject to known hazards or geotechnical constraints. In his rebuttal evidence, with regard to the eastern approach, Mr Brown notes that the eastern roundabout will shift eastwards, and this will affect the Dobb property to a greater degree than was shown in the notified Ladies Mile structure plan. Until that design is undertaken, it is not possible to assess the residual land availability for residential activities within the upper terrace of the Dobb property, taking into account the topography and the limited extent of land on the upper terrace. Mr Brown's revised structure plan, which is my figure 2 attached over page, therefore now covers the Dobb land with an indicative road and roundabout annotation, but it remains strangely outside the red line showing the extent of the plan change area. So just to note, we have a structure plan showing details that extend outside that plan change area. I support a comprehensive approach to the eastern approach, and that requires consideration and inclusion of the Dobb land for transport and or residential purposes. I have no expertise in landscape matters, but from my planning perspective, note that the planting on the site was deliberately required to obscure views of Lake Hayes Estate. It also blocks views towards the O&L. That's my figure 3. And in that figure 3, you can see the remarkable sort of peeking out behind the trees. The landscape joint witness statement notes that as a result of the Ladies Mile zone, the gateway is now further east. Enabling a small amount of well-designed residential development on the site would in fact open up views towards the Remarkables O&L, contrary to Mr Skeldon's rebuttal statement. With regard to scope, I am not a lawyer, but from my planning perspective, the submission is clearly on the plan change. The plan change covers almost the entire upper terrace at the Ladies Mile, both north and south of the state highway. The Dobb family site directly adjoins and touches the plan change area, and the upper terrace was even included in figure 1 of the Section 32 report showing the plan change area. The indicative master plan even had the roundabout partly on the Dobb site, which is my figure 1 opposite. The submission raises relevant matters for how land within the identified area in the Section 32 report is zoned. It seems extremely harsh to state the submission is not on the plan change as per the Council's legal submissions. In my opinion, these submissions ignore the real-world nature of the site and its location and appears to be at odds with its own planning expert, Mr Brown, who has shown an indicative roundabout and road on the Dobb site. So I guess the point I'm making there is if the scope to show those annotations on the structure plan on the site, then I think the Dobb submission is within scope. In his Section 42A report, Mr Brown recommends changing how the eastern end of the plan change area is shown in the structure plan based on Mr Lowe's urban design advice. His figure 7 shows the roundabout moved further to the east onto the Dobb land in response to the Finland submission. The Finland submission does not mention the Dobb land at all, yet that change has been considered to be within scope. In conclusion, the upper terrace of the site is suitable for residential development and should be considered as part of a comprehensive and integrated approach to the Pūtahi Ladies Mile Zone. Including and rezoning the Dobb land better achieves the purpose of the RMA, the National Policy Statement on Urban Development and the plan change objectives. So if I can just quickly run you through those figures attached to my summary statement. So figure 1 is the indicative master plan showing the roundabout partly on the Dobb property.
Yep.
Figure 2 is I believe the latest structure plan from 27 November hearing from Mr Brown. Figure 3 is just Google Street View showing the effect of that screen planting on views from towards the O&L. And the last plan is just a annotated aerial photo just to mark up a few details of the site, really. So there's the upper terrace with the red outline, the lower terrace with the white outline and the embankment in between. I've shown in blue there the approximate developable area once you allow for a 25-metre building restriction. The trees are currently about 12 metres back from the highway, so built form under the submission would be roughly behind where the trees are today, and I've just kind of marked up an indicative footprint of an MDR style development. I basically just copied what was on the other side of the road in the master plan. So perhaps now if Joe and Matt read their statement and then questions.
I was hoping to ask you some specific questions that aren't related to your client.
Okay.
I don't mind waiting, but customarily we'd just go straight to you.
No, that's fine.
Yeah. So one of the things you'll be aware is on our mind is this question of transportation triggers. And one of the questions about development on your client's upper terrace is where they get vehicle access from. And it might be that access from the highway in a 60 kilometre per hour future environment might be a very different proposition to the existing one. And it's out of our hands anyway, it would be a Wakakatahi highway operator preference. To the extent that we may land in recommending support of a zone, and it may be subject to restrictions on what can happen until certain improvements are made. And I'm not asking you if it's what your client has asked for, but would it, in your view, be appropriate for us if we were persuaded to support rezoning the site to, say, a medium density zone, that site should also be included in the land subject to any upgrade type trigger or requirement? Or is it your view it should just be let go because it's so small?
No, in my submission and evidence, I suggested linking development of the upper terrace to the transport triggers. So I think that needs to be part of the equation. In rebuttal evidence, it became apparent that the new roading link through to Lake Hayes Estate that goes right past the property was intended to be for public transport only, which wasn't something I'd picked up on when I wrote the submission and evidence. So I don't think that completely excludes the site being able to use it, but the other option is, of course, directly onto the state highway under the current 100 kilometre per hour speed limit. NZTA probably won't be delighted by that, but I think under a reduced speed limit, it's flat, got good sight distances either way. We appreciate it's subject to a further approval from the Highways Agency to access that, but that would be the other option. So yes, I think it should be linked to the transport improvements. Yep.
I'm really, really thankful for your figure 3. And And we've been having a series of, I'll be blunt, frustrating discussions with the designers about what the setbacks are about and should they be about viewing landscapes or not, and what happens with trees blocking views and that sort of thing. And this is helpful to me, and I think you were saying those trees might not yet be at their fullest mature height. They might have more growing to go.
Not sure about that,
Yeah.
actually. Do you-
Well, that's okay. That's okay, Mr. Devlin. The question is, and you mentioned to the chair there was a consent notice. There was a requirement that these be planted.
Yes, that's right. So that's a hangover from the council's previous planning policy, which was to try and screen Lake Hayes Estate from the Ladies Mile. So there is a consent notice
Okay.
requiring they
So-
remain.
As a planner, if, again, we've been given a range of positions on what setbacks should or shouldn't apply. If we included the site, all of the designers have been pretty consistent that whatever the setback is, it should be consistent. If it was less than the current legacy setback, and if, for instance, it came with a policy for a preference that talked about maintaining views to the landscape, it's a de facto discretionary activity, isn't it, to seek to get rid of a consent notice if times have changed?
Correct. Yeah.
Would that possibly be a solution that could help improve what's available on the client's land? This effectively allowing that planted tree row to be removed or replanted much closer to the highway or something like that.
Yes, I think under the MDR precinct, consent would be required for the residential component, and the matters of discretion from memory would capture things like that. And as part of any application, you'd seek to cancel the consent notice. I guess the trees are 12 metres back at the moment. I aligned with the 25 metre building restriction next door on the council's site. And I think the 25 metre along that southern side of the highway there is now proposed right along the length just about, except for perhaps that Stalker property.
The last question I had was just, and again, I really appreciate you've just tried to give us an idea, and it's all indicative, so I won't be too picky about that. But the embankment, as an Aucklander who's seen all the flatland go, I see all sorts of things being dug into hillsides now because that's all that's left.
Yeah.
And it strikes me that dwellings such as you've drawn that might be 1 story or 2 stories at the high end could possibly have a basement level effectively excavated into part of the embankment and again just effectively provide a much bigger area of development than what we could perhaps say you've identified as a conservative starting point. But when I look around these areas and I see these little embankments, I don't see people having excavated into them. So is there a particular reason for why that hasn't happened here, or could it happen on this site?
Yeah, it seems to be a sort of sacrosanct thing that when Lake Hayes Estate was created, they kept off that embankment right around the sort of northern extent of Lake Hayes Estate. And I do recall in the past proposals to build on it, and it met a lot of opposition. Really? And so I don't believe there's a strict planning control on the embankment in the PDP today, like there's no building restriction area or anything like that. But I guess didn't want to have that fight. Pick out battles, and building on the embankment's probably not the...
I can understand it in that lower density zone where everyone's building spacious 1-storey houses because their sites are so big. So it's probably just never been of an imperative that, say, in a medium density zone and the enablement of more density could support. But no, look, I just wanted to understand your view on it. There's no other meaning to the question. So thanks, Mr. Devlin.
I also have a couple of questions for you, Mr. Devlin, if I may. So, one is around you talking about the extension of the active travel link to the east would be enabled by the proposed rezoning of the site. I'm just interested to explore that a little bit with you. Clearly a roundabout has been identified for the eastern end of the Ladies Mile variation, and that would provide access to that public transport road that edges the site. Within the plan provisions, I believe there's a requirement to have an at-grade pedestrian crossing across State Highway 6 as part of that intersection. And then looking at Google Earth, what we did without it, I don't know. Down at McDowell Drive, opposite that, I see there's a pathway that sort of drops down the embankment into Lake Hayes Estate.
Yes.
I guess my question is, if there was a desire to create a link along the southern side of State Highway 6 between that existing path and the new roundabout, is there any reason why that couldn't be provided within the road corridor, accepting that you're not an engineer, but from a planning perspective, is there anything to stop that happening?
No.
No. So,
Yes.
in reality, does the rezoning have to happen to provide that?
Well, if you look at that master plan in my figure 1, the active transport link was well set back from the state highway, and it terminates at the new road off the roundabout. What I was saying in my submission and evidence was that you could continue that active transport link, well set back from the state highway, so it's a much more pleasant experience. I don't dispute there's probably within the state highway corridor to also have it within the corridor, but potentially by including the DOB site, you could show that as an active travel link on the structure plan, and then you'd have continuous off-highway active transport through the DOB site, the council site, the country club, and through that consent I worked on for the Shotover Country on the corner of Stalker and Shotover. You've got a off-highway active transport link the whole southern side.
Yeah.
So.
No, I understand. Thank you. I just needed that clarification. Thank you very much.
Warning.
No, I'm good, thanks.
Gillian? Just two things from me, they're both very brief. The first one was in the submission, I think, the infrastructure's mentioned for connections. One option is sort of into Ladies Mile, which I suspect, given State Highway 6, may be challenging. The other's down to Lake Hayes. My assumption is, and I just wondered if you know from your experience, that there's no capacity constraints, etc., for 2 to 4 dwellings to link into Lake Hayes systems.
I haven't got engineering advice on it, but my understanding is the Lake Hayes stormwater system doesn't have the same capacity constraints that Shotover Country does. So, there's 2 options to service. Either potentially you've got medium density residential on the other side of the road, which would theoretically be connected to council reticulated infrastructure, and also on the site at the lower terraces, council reticulated infrastructure. So
you could connect to that.
I'm confident there's an engineering solution. Yeah.
Thank you. And then the one other question, and you may have had these discussions, or your clients might have, but just whether you've had any updated discussions with the council on the potential shifting east of the roundabout onto that flat area.
No, because I think it's recently come out in Mr. Brown's
a new issue.
Rebuttal. I think it was the first.
Yep.
I think it was rebuttal, but in response to the Finland submission and the low evidence.
And the redesigning of that eastern end of the...
And I agree with Mr. Brown that the eastern end's important, but the DOB land is part of that equation. Yeah. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, over to Mr. and Mrs. Dobb.
Matt, so you're going to read this one?
Hi, we are Matt and Joe Dobb, the owners of 13 Ada Place. Thank you for the opportunity to submit our thoughts on the rezoning. There's 2 points that we'd like to make today. The first is that our property is considered by QLDC as out of scope, which we strongly disagree with. Our property is a split-level site. There's an upper terrace which measures approximately 4,000 square metres and backs directly onto the southern side of the highway. We are directly opposite and next to areas that are being rezoned. The notified plan has rezoned the entire upper terrace of the southern side of Ladies Mile, with the exception of our property. In the published S42A report, there is also a reference, figure 4, to a proposed new intersection which encroaches onto our property. So we're just a bit unsure why we're out of that scope. The second point is that we're currently zoned rural, definitely unusual for a house in suburban Lake Hayes estate. As part of the plan change, we would like the upper terrace to be considered for rezoning to either medium density to align with the northern side of Ladies Mile on the opposite side of the road, or the property to be low density suburban residential to align with the rest of Lake Hayes estate. We believe the upper terrace would be a great location for a small amount of residential development. It is a lovely flat and elevated site. The closest houses on the lower terrace would be well separated by the current cycle path, then a 70-metre long, approximately 20-metre high sloping embankment. The elevation is the same as the newly developed Kawara Heights subdivision in between Lake Hayes and Shotover Country, and would be within walking distance of the proposed new retail area, school, etc. We've been part of the Lake Hayes community for nearly 10 years and we're invested in the development of the area. We look forward to some collaboration to ensure the best outcomes for the future of Ladies Mile and its surrounding neighbourhoods. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Dobb? Ian?
I have one question, but before I ask it, I just want to recognise that engaging an expert isn't a cheap exercise, even if Mr. Devlin's doing you his most amazing cut price sympathy rate.
Yeah.
And it certainly isn't the case that people get better chances if they bring an expert along, and we evaluate everything we hear. But I do just want to recognise that it is immensely helpful for us when people like you do engage an expert, and it gives us a fresh perspective of things. Sometimes even just having them agree with other things, that's a form of substantiation that's not related to you, but it actually is really helpful for us. So I just wanted to say, whereas some companies, they're a bigger scale of operation and it's just a normal everyday thing for you strike me as normal people, so let's run with that. For normal people, I recognise it can be a huge thing, and again, I just want to recognise that and say thank you to you both.
Thanks.
The question I have for you relates to the that lower terrace. There's a little pathway running along it. I haven't yet had the chance to cruise along on a bike, but I have seen it, and I just wanted to ask you: is that on land you own with an easement on it?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
exactly right. So it's at the back of our garden. We've got the cycle path.
That's very good of
directly
you.
At the back.
Yep.
And then there's probably about 10 metres of a bit more flat land. And then the embankment goes up.
Yep.
And then it levels out again onto that flat elevated site on the upper terrace.
What I'm looking at, the aerial photograph that Mr. Devlin had, it was that one with the little houses on it.
Yep.
When I look at the embankment, it looks to me, near the bottom of the lower, or the top of the lower terrace, there looks like a little white shed.
Yeah.
And then immediately to the left of that, up the embankment, it looks like it's a different kind of ground cover. Maybe it's mown grass. Is that a less steep bit of the embankment,
No,
or is
it's
it
all
just?
the same. We just mow that
That's
to get
where
up
Matt
there.
chooses to mow.
Right,
Yeah, so the little
okay.
white shed is my chicken shed. And then we
Weekend
obviously can't
hoppers,
mow.
huh?
We can't mow the whole thing. It takes quite a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just a different level of grass.
Okay, and so what I'm interested in understanding, and now we're street viewing your place. Isn't technology wonderful? How invasive. Currently, that trail, that path, crosses your land, and then it looks like to the east it starts winding its way up to the highway.
Yeah.
How much further along do you estimate it is before that path actually connects with the highway?
Oh, not too much further. Maybe another 10
Okay.
From the picture.
from the picture to the highway, the end of the picture.
Okay. So there's no benefit in considering whether or not development of your upper terrace and inclusion might lead to a means of getting from the lower terrace to the upper terrace where there might be an intersection and that sort of thing. So that was why I was asking those questions, but it looks like there's already a facility pretty close, so there's no need. That was the only question I had for you, but yeah, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any? Judith?
Yep. So, good morning and thank you very much for coming in. As Commissioner Munro said, we do appreciate the time it takes and the effort, so thank you. The question I've got is around your current rural zoning and whether under that zoning you are able to subdivide and build on that upper terrace anyway. And it may be a question for Mr. Devlin.
Yes, I have turned my mind to whether they could seek consent to build on that upper terrace. It would be fully discretionary in the rural zone to seek consent for a building platform or a house. The problematic matter is the consent notice that restricts that because it was deliberately kept clear of built form and further subdivision through a consent notice as part of the development of Lake Hayes Estate for that screening purpose. And the case law around changing consent notices these days is there needs to be a material change in circumstances, and that's achieved if there's a rezoning. Under the current rural zoning, I think we'd have to make a strong case on that, but it's more difficult. Yeah.
So just for clarity, does the consent notice just cover the requirement to have the trees in place, or is there a consent notice that says you can't subdivide and build?
All of the above, yeah.
All of it.
So, yep. So that, it was deliberate to keep that upper terrace clear of built form and keep it for screening to hide away Lake Hayes Estate. So I think if we applied under the rural zone to put dwellings up there and sought to vary that consent notice, it's I think it's challenging. Yeah.
Okay, so the other question I've got is acknowledging that the rezoning or proposed rezoning does cover a lot of the land on the south side of Ladies Mile. When we look at what the rezoning allows, to the west, it's sort of open space, so it's sort of the community sports fields, an open space area. And under the existing zoning to the east, you've got, I think it's informal recreation under the PDP. So I guess my question is around why, from an urban design perspective, once again, this might actually be more of a Mr. Devlin question, popping in a handful of houses is a good outcome when you've got open space. You'd have a pocket of housing, then quite a lot of open space before you have any other built form on that side of the road.
Yes, my comment on my evidence on that was directly next to the Dobb site isn't necessarily open space. It's a new road, so quite urban form. And on the council's block there, that may be predominantly used for sports fields and open space, but also there'll be built form associated with that. Changing rooms, potentially, court facilities, all that sort of stuff. But probably the key reason is just that framing of the entrance to the Ladies Mile on both sides of the road. I think there are good urban design reasons that support that. I guess, sort of an arrival experience into that urban area. The landscape architects have said the gateway's further to the east, but this is the kind of hard boundary of the urban zoning. So it also ticks boxes around, SIP-TED in terms of overlooking of that road and council space.
So when you say the road and the council space, do you mean the public transport link?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Can I just add a little bit to that as well?
Sure.
Just at the moment as well, you can see the trees on the upper terrace. There's probably about 30 piney type trees. So they really just do, at the moment, they're just hiding. There's a great view up there to the Remarkables, and at the moment that double row of trees is just completely hiding. It's just hiding it. So I just think with a bit of well-designed small residential up there would really actually open up that space.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thanks.
Wayne or Gillian?
Yeah, thanks. I'm not sure how much you've been following of the discussions over the last week and a half, but there's been lots of discussion around the treatment of the setback and the corridor on the southern side as you run through there. Moving more towards an urban corridor to reduce the speed down to 60 kilometres an hour and have that look and feel of residential community to enable that. And just listening to the fact that you may want to remove the larger trees there and provide a different vegetative treatment there, should the setback be less, would you envisage retaining the same footprint if it was medium density or low density? Because I'm just thinking, before you answer the question, that they would be the first piece of residential you would see as you were coming in, thinking there's going to be balls and various other things coming out from those sports grounds onto State Highway directly after that, and maybe that is actually a really good transition point, and just wanted to understand what you would look to put on that site if the setback was changed.
So I haven't been keeping up with all the discussions over the last couple of weeks that the panel's obviously heard, but I would note that in a submission I wrote for Shotover Country Limited, I explained where the 75 metre building restriction area had come from, and that I didn't think it was particularly relevant to replicate it through the Ladies Mail zone, so that might have some relevance. But yeah, I've aligned with the 25 metre building restriction area. If that was reduced, it would probably be more important, in my opinion, that the MDR precinct apply, because that gives the council control over the sort of final built form and appearance. If it was lower density suburban residential, you could simply build a dwelling on that site if it met the bulk and location control. So yeah, I think the importance of the site at the gateway there better lends itself to the MDR provisions, because they have greater control over what you get there, if that helps. In terms of reducing the setback, yeah, obviously at this point the mile sort of opens up to the south. I think the setback should align with what's imposed on the council's site, to be honest.
And I think this is a complete change to what's been considered there in the past, which was about screening all of the residential. And so there's been a bit of discussion about frequency of trees, types of trees, vegetative applications and those sort of things, actually to provide view shafts of the housing so that you realise you're in a residential area. And when you look at the images, you've provided very dense vegetation that also screens landscapes. So you talked about changing that vegetation. Would it be in a similar way of having maybe clusters and some open vistas? So
yeah, I think you'd need a landscape architect to come up with a really good designed approach, and I think the matters of discretion for the MDR would enable that. So you might be able to keep some of that existing planning, but the easternmost part could potentially be removed and open up views to the ONL. Yeah, it's important not to forget that the Lake Hayes estate was created through a submission on the proposed district plan in 1995, and at the time it was way out in the middle of nowhere, and they were quite keen to sort of hide it away, and they've been quite effective at doing that. It's not that visible from the state highway, but I think we've moved on now, and seeing built form or urban development's not necessarily an adverse effect. Well-designed urban development's fine to look at, but yeah, it would need a landscape plan with it. So, yeah.
Thanks very much. I'm good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I have no questions.
Thank you. And just one very quick one for me, just conscious of time. If we were minded to accept what you said, the other low density option is the Ladies Mile low density. Yeah. Would you have an issue with that zoning?
No, not necessarily, because it's pretty similar to the lower density suburban residential zone. I guess I preferred that because part of the site with the existing house on it is already adjacent to the lower density suburban residential zone, and it was also applied through this plan change on the country club. So yeah, but the LDR precinct is another option. The submission did suggest alternative zoning mechanisms, so
Yes.
there's certainly scope
Yep.
to consider that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just noted that. I just thought I'd quickly ask. Thank you very much. Thank you both for coming in.
All good?
And we'll let you enjoy this lovely
Yeah.
fine day, no doubt with
Back
some
to work.
lawn mowing up the bank. So,
Thanks.
happy lawn mowing in the sunshine, Mr. Dobb.
Not too bad, yeah. Thank you.
I need one for myself.
What am I doing? Ah, lovely. Thank you. Well worth asking.
It's only been a week.
Thank you very much. So we now have the Sanderson Group presentation. So over to you.
Kia ora, I'm Erin Stegg, and this is Mr. Jared Baronian. We're here, as you said, to discuss Queenstown Commercial and Sanderson Group. I think we'll start with Mr. Baronian and then move on to my summary, please.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Stagg. Morena Commissioners. It's a great day to be in Queenstown today. Must be the best weather in the country. I guess that's why everyone's moving here. My name's Jared, CEO of Sanderson Group. I take it my evidence has been read and noted. I just want to touch on a few key points today and allow for any questions. As background, since 2016, we've developed 35 hectares of land on the southern side of Ladies Mile. Fraser Sanderson, our group chairman, is very passionate about the area, being the visionary behind its most recent developments. Our developments here include the Queenstown Country Club, Kararau Park with the award-winning Central Lakes, Southern Cross Hospital, and a large residential subdivision. I guess generally we don't see Queenstown slowing down as New Zealand's fastest growing area. It's hugely popular and a highly attractive location. Everything is on offer here, adventure and amenity. I guess in a nutshell, it's one large scale resort. So the population growth won't slow, it's only going to increase, and the responsibility to address the housing situation remains regardless of where the demand comes from, being it local, Auckland or further abroad. You'll be familiar with the Ladies Mile area from your site visit. Residential zoning of the northern side of State Highway 6 is inevitable. It's landlocked with the Shotover River to the west, Lake Hayes to the east, Slope Hill to the north. The southern side is already developed. All the core infrastructure is within eyesight, right on the doorstep. The newly commissioned Shotover bore field, it's already there and it's right-sized for the future growth of Ladies Mile. And the waste treatment plant, which has now been upgraded. A new town centre, school, sports and playing fields will complete this as the most livable community in New Zealand, or within a short 20-minute walking distance. Completing this part of the Eastern Corridor is the most logical area to accommodate Queenstown's growth and address housing supply in this area. We have been supportive of QLDC's Ladies Mile master planning and rezoning process from the outset and firmly remain so. Our response to the plan change has been focused on ensuring the framework put in place has flexibility for development to occur without delayed pace, as the market allows so, and based on what is feasible. 6-storey buildings are not unfeasible. They just come with added challenges and complexity. I've outlined this in my evidence, including design, engineering, consenting, funding, and construction resourcing. They're multi-year projects and they don't assure affordability. Building at this scale won't happen quickly, so our response to housing density at 40 dwellings per hectare on a gross basis reflects this position and what is required to relieve housing supply while ensuring diversity of building topologies and product type. 1, 2 and 3 bed units across 3 to 6 storey buildings. This is the best outcome to assure medium and long-term housing supply across the 10-year plus development horizon, which is what it will take to complete Ladies Mile. It won't happen quickly, so we need to get on with it now without delay. We must enable a broad range of housing outcomes here for more than just the service worker, the single person, or the young couple. We've got to deliver livable product fit for families, downsizers, retirees. Then there are the visitors and those who just want to own a home in Queenstown. They are not going away. Regarding the high density building envelope, setbacks and recession planes, alignment with Tier 1 council standards is critical. What's the point of pushing high density only to constrain the building envelope and force more onerous, costly, timely and complicated consenting process for developers? This all impacts feasibility and affordability. The reality is the land will be developed into super lots and the building envelopes need to be appropriately allowed for placement of buildings of scale within this. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. Why cap maximum density? With a minimum density in place, why not allow whatever density to occur that can within a maximum height plane and a rational building envelope? Centralisation of the commercial precinct is essential. This will create a hub of life, energy and community. We have put forward a position for an extended commercial area to the east where the concentration of high density will occur. Once fully developed, over 12,000 people will live within a 20-minute walking catchment from this precinct. On your site visit, you may have visited the 2.4 hectare Karawau Park facility we developed with the hospital. Based on what we have created here and what is required to sustain essential services, goods and general business for 12,000 permanent residents of Ladies Mile, it's clear the area initially provisioned as a commercial precinct and Ladies Mile just isn't large enough. In closing, we are passionate about ensuring a successful outcome that enables flexibility to develop and deliver housing supply at an appropriate pace and density as it is needed to alleviate the residential accommodation situation in Queenstown. Thank you for your time to hear this matter.
Thank you very much. Now, any questions? Judith.
Good morning. I
Morning.
do have one question. Just picking up on what you were saying around whether there is a need for maximum
Yep.
density limits. Is that in relation to the high density zone only, or are you thinking the medium density zone as well?
More talking the high density.
High density.
I guess that's kind of the overlay that sits across a land holding that we have. So I'll focus in on that, but I don't see why it wouldn't apply in the same context to the medium density as well.
So just thinking through the logic of that, are you comfortable with having a building height restriction as the way to manage density in those two areas?
Yeah, so the way that I've seen it play out in other plan changes around New Zealand, 22 metre building height or whatever is deemed appropriate as a height plan in that area. And then obviously then there's a building envelope that's defined with recession plans and setbacks. So I don't see why developers could not develop product within those constraints to whatever the density is that allows them to from an urban, an architectural and a design perspective.
Thank you.
a similar question, but maybe in reverse. We've had lots of discussions around density and some of the questions we put out there with regard to achieving that, what was 1,100, now 2,400 dwellings. Does the need to be zones for density at all? Or could we leave it up to the developers as long as they're achieving the overall density for the entire zone to develop in a manner that suits them?
Look, I guess when I go for a walk through Christchurch CBD, I see a huge amount of different topologies, from 3 to 4 to 5 levels. I don't believe there's any specific criteria across the CBD there that's, forced that outcome. It's just naturally evolved. That's the same process that I see occurring in Ladies Mile.
And the next one's an enabling question. We had it suggested that to enable development in the first instance and to ensure there was investment, that maybe up to 100% of residential visitor accommodation should be part of the what's allowed rather than the 25% that's currently considered.
Yeah, look, I just see, obviously, I don't think we we put forward a firm view on that, but I guess in general, the higher you're building, the more pre-sales you're going to have to get the funding equation to stack up, and so that's going to require some mix to obviously get pre-sales. So, funding big builds is pretty challenging, so you've got to look at all possible drivers to get the project across the line.
But you've done quite a few by the sound of what you've laid down in front of us. You haven't had to go to 100% to achieve the builds in the past. Is 25% adequate?
A lot of our core business is in retirement villages, so it's a different type of product. Yeah.
No, I'm good, thanks.
Julie?
No questions.
Ian?
I don't have any questions of you, but one thing that I was most interested in was your prediction that there'll be a lot of super lot type subdivision preceding development. And you're not the first submitter that's given us that view. So what I've been doing is working through the latest version of subdivision provisions. And while the land use provisions say a lot about minimum densities, whatever they may be, and I'm doing this now, Ms. Stagg, so that when you get your turn, you can reflect on what I'm saying and comment too. Mr. Brown, do you have the latest version of the provisions handy?
Yes.
Right. Subdivision. And Mr. Murray yesterday was also talking, without providing anything to us, about methods that may be useful or not, and he talked about, are there mechanisms at the subdivision stage to set out what that future expectation may be. And as I'm going through the subdivision provisions, I get down to the minimum lot areas. That seems to be framed towards the end dimensions of a minimum allotment. So 300 metres in the low density residential precinct and no minimum elsewhere. And then we get to the restrictions of discretion. And the only one I can find that's helpful related to this density question is item X between C and D. And it says how the subdivision design will enable. And enable doesn't mean require. Enable just means show us your super lot. And any applicant can simply say, of course my lot can have super density. And then, other than that one matter of discretion that talks about enabling, we then have an information requirement. But I'm not convinced an information requirement can then be used by a council, to start imposing conditions. It's a supporting document. It's not actually the substantive part of an application, as I read it. And so what I wanted to signal, and again, this is really done now, so Ms. Stagg can have a think about it and comment when she comes to it. I'm not sure in the subdivision provisions, if we were to agree that there's a likelihood that some kind of super lot type subdivision might come before land use consent-led development, whether in fact what's put to us, I don't want to say has sufficient teeth, but that's what comes to mind, to actually set and train those requirements that then come later. I'll leave it there, Mr. Brown, because I don't want you to, unless there's anything you want to respond or there's some provisions I've missed out that's useful, I just wanted to leave that with you to think about.
I'll just highlight one thing. In the assessment matters,
Yeah.
and I might, based on your question, first of all, I'll just go back a step. Provision X is a new
Yep.
provision that came
Yep.
from the panel.
Yep, I see the comment there.
Dialogue with me.
Yep.
That's point one. Point two is that in the assessment matters at 27.9, we added a new assessment matter for applications for effectively for super lots.
Yeah, and where's that?
That's on page 54 of the 8th of December version. So it's right at the end of the assessment matters.
So this is that number I?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at that.
Now, what I might have to do is, on the basis of your question, just see the tie-in between that and the matter of discretion to see if the matter of discretion
Yes.
has got sufficient.
And also, when I did read through I previously, forgive me for not raising it, but that simply to me seems to show that the land could be serviced and could be developed. It doesn't say anything about what the expectation of the person who then buys it might be.
So
And this is I'm most interested where a developer might be doing various super lots and relying on an average type density to do something less than what's expected early on the basis of someone else doing all the heavy lifting later. And whether in fact the subdivision provisions would allow the council to even go there and then say, well, hey, you owe us 100 lots, where are they? If the provisions talk only about enabling or allowing or supporting. So that's just for you to think about, Mr. Brown. I don't want to take it any further with you because it's really Ms. Stagg's time, and I'll stop there.
Then just two very general questions from me. The first one you mentioned in terms of timing, maybe a 10-year plan to develop. So in your mind, for the Ladies Mile variation, we've heard evidence about short-term, medium-term, long-term. You're sort of looking what others have expressed at as a medium-term sort of time frame plus?
Well, I guess it's taken us 6 years to do everything that we've done so far on the southern side of the road. So when I just look at that in the context of what's on the northern side, which is at a much, higher level of density, it's, I'd consider it as a 10-year plus horizon.
And that's...
There's only a certain amount of construction that can be paced out each year. There's obviously upfront enabling works that's required. There's resource consents that, will be required. So, you've just got to look at how it's going to play out over time, and that's the horizon that I would map out quite logically.
Yep. And you mention the issue of the commercial precinct and the expansion, and there's been discussion and there's expansion. We've had many submitters talk to us about allowing commercial in their strip of the Ladies Mile zone. Is there an insatiable demand for commercial space in Queenstown, in your experience, such that basically the zone can be freed up left, right and centre for commercial, or does there need to be some limit on commercial? Because you use the words, the 2 hectares is grossly undersized, it's been extended, but we've got a whole heap of other people wanting commercial too. And I just wondered your view.
I've lived in a lot of high density environments overseas. Typically from what I've seen work best is a concentration of it rather than scattering it. Just creates a much more vibrant hub for those types of activities. There's going to be, 12,000 plus people on the northern and southern sides in the future. I guess it's all part of the concept to, people will largely walk to this location. So, yeah, I kind of feel that fundamentally from an urban design principle, you need a hub, and I guess that's what we've advocated there with the area, the commercial area that we've put forward.
And obviously, and we have been through Kaurau Park, that's that sort of one level or single level-ish commercial. Do you see potential, and we've had evidence last week, etc., about potential commercial with residential above it? Have you been involved in
100%.
anything
That's what
like
I would
that?
envision would play out in that area. Yeah, retail with residential above it, potentially even some buildings with office space between. Yeah.
And one of the discussions we had with the council economists was this is going to develop over time, and we've discussed that. Initially or over time, markets might change. And one of the things I was pondering was whether you could start with one level, but then in 10, 15 years, maybe add on to it. And people, that's exactly the expression I got from the council. So yeah, it's more, or the council expert, so it's more you do it once and you're just not going to
Yeah,
come
as a
back.
developer, that our approach would be to do it once.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, you just only have to look at around. There's not too many buildings that get retrofitted, apart from, you know, historic buildings.
And then just finally, densities.
Yeah.
We've had a lot about what's the right density, etc. The various densities for the high, medium, high, etc. Just want to be very. We've got traffic and transport evidence about the 40 dph in terms of that drives a mode shift. Obviously, the high density has come down from what was initially proposed, but in your experience, etc., at that 50 level, which is the present council position, I take it you still have concerns with that, or you're more comfortable with the 50?
Well, I guess our position is 40 on a gross, which is
Exactly.
about 60 on a net. So look, that's what we're advocating at, and I believe that drives, a topology from a 3 to a 6 level building.
And in terms of, we've had people say, look, if you go for the higher density, that's going to push development out into the long-term horizon. Would that be the sort of Sanderson perspective too, that if you go too high in your density, you're in effect, well, that's not what the market wants now, so it's just going to sit there?
Oh, look, I'm sure you're going to push it out. Like, just, larger buildings take longer in general. As I said, they're multi-year projects.
Yep.
You only have to look around Remarkables Park. There's only a handful of them there, so it's a good example.
Yep. Thank you very much.
All right. Is my microphone working, hopefully? All right.
Yep.
Morning, everyone. I'll just read through my summary, and I've also included, I've done some work on the density rule that Mr. Brown has done some work on and Ms. Hoogovan has done some work on, so it's going to look a bit like a Frankenstein rule, but that's what's the other document there.
Thank you, Ms. Stagg. We've read your summary.
Oh, this summary here? Oh, yeah, perfect.
Because it was put up online
Oh, perfect.
yesterday.
I'll skip it then and
so
leave it be.
the key things really from me are just the key points from your summary.
All right, yep.
That you'd just like to touch on, and that will then guide our questioning.
Perfect, okay. I'll just go through each point then. Well, I mean, density is obviously Sanderson Group's main concern. They would prefer a density of 40 dwellings per hectare gross. And I think that we can achieve the density that is desired through incentives rather than requiring more or a further minimum. I think the minimum density is good. We just need to lower it to 40. But alternatively, if the preference is to retain it as it is, I have tried to redraft this a little bit so it's easier to administer, having administered this district plan for years of my life. And I think that we can get a mix of typologies through writing in a discretion matter, for instance, or a rule saying, look, we need whatever mix is desired. Although if the market's there, I would assume it would happen anyways, really.
You'd see that as a more sort of efficient way of...
Yep, definitely.
doing that.
Although I think you would have to be clear in the matter of discretion instead of saying just a mix of the typologies, although Mr. Brony probably won't like this too much. You'd have to say, hey, we need whatever it is, 10% one-bedroom apartments, 20% two-bedroom apartments, and then the rest is open to the market, or even 3. Because what happens if you keep the density really tight, you might end up, for instance, with buildings with lots of 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, and then you don't end up with the families moving in, you don't end up with a good mix of community, you've got some issues with the schools, you've got all sorts of follow-on issues. You don't want to prohibit that, but I do recognize that there is a very large need in the community for those mostly 2-bedroom units. So yeah, mix is important. Maximum parking, you would have read that. I do think that, unfortunately, this district is such that, I myself have had to travel to Dunedin 3 times last month because my child needed a tooth out. It just is what it is. There's no public transport there. Yeah, and I don't drive my car to work. I am a cycle commuter, so my car sits at home all week and then is used for that sort of thing. And then reserves, yep. So that's probably key points, really.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Now,
And I can
questions?
None for me, thank you.
No questions from me.
No?
I don't have a specific question for you, other than to close the circle of what you heard me discussing with Mr. Brown and how the density provisions at the land use might relate to the subdivision, and whether you have any thoughts you want to share on that.
And you will see in my evidence in chief that I did submit that I was concerned the plan didn't actually provide for bulk lot or the super lot subdivision, and that assessment matter helps. I do think, because I think what's going to happen, and Mr. Brony, correct me if I'm wrong, is that most of the developers will come in with super lots and they'll actually try to run their kind of main trunk infrastructure through that process. And I do believe that the consent team has one of those applications in front of them and doesn't really know what to do with it as we speak. And I don't think the provisions of the subdivision chapter as they stand right now really guide the council planners onto how to, and the engineers really, how to deal with the running of that big infrastructure and everything. So I think there could be some things done to that rule. I haven't played with it exactly, so I'll maybe give it a go and send it to you. Well, sorry, I didn't quite finish, but...
Well, no, just on the first part of it. As has been said by other submitters, we have climbed a veritable aoraki of information, and to the extent that we can minimise even more,
True.
that's
Information.
good. If your ultimate view is that there is merit in something like what the council has started getting to,
Yep.
my preference is that you just directly try and engage with
Yep,
Mr.
absolutely.
Brown, and if there's a possibility of us getting one piece of paper, even if it has multiple comments on it,
Yep.
that does help.
Yep.
Not that we don't want to thoroughly read things over Christmas, of course.
No, that's fair. Yep.
No? Only me? Okay. Anyway, you said you hadn't finished.
Yeah, so from there, once that bulk super lot subdivision is granted, I would assume that lots would either be sold on or developed by whoever's developing them, and at that point you'd come in with your minimum densities and your street layouts and your urban design and your stormwater and your whole package, I guess, which would be a big consent, but that's how I see it happening.
So the thrust of the questions put to Mr. Brown was not just the sequential flow of how development might happen. It's if a developer puts aside 20 super lots and the first few, everyone's reasonably happy because there's still lots of land left over for
see.
density. But then by the time you get to the last 2 lots and there's an expectation for whatever the gap is between what's been delivered and what's required, how does the council, through the provisions, and how does a purchaser of the super lot, who might not realise they're the unlucky one because they came to the party last, everyone's left there with the clean-up, so to speak?
I mean, I do think you could amend 49.516 to B, which is Mr. Brown's rule about that covenanting of the balance for reaching the high density, and change it from the same ownership to the site.
49 land use, isn't it?
Aye, true. Well, but if you were assessing density on a site-by-site basis, you shouldn't hit that problem because each site would come in for the application and you'd say, well, you haven't hit your 50. Okay. You need to either set aside a bit for more or develop it all to 50. On each site. So right now it says the same ownership. If you change that to site, then you could do it site-by-site basis.
How big do you think the super lots are going to be?
3,000 squares, maybe.
Not that big.
What I'm getting to is, do we actually need rules providing for averaging of densities if it's actually all going to come down to a site-by-site based? Even 3,000 metres, it's not going to make or break the whole plan change.
Yeah.
Why have the elaborate framework of identifying what will happen in the future on this little corner of the site?
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
All right, look, that's been really helpful, thank you.
It won't be easy to administer, that's for sure, yeah.
Well, that's why we've got, experts
Yeah.
on all sides.
Gillian?
Can I pick up on something, and I apologise if if you've already covered this. I was a bit distracted with something else you'd written, but I want to pick up on the parking, your reference to parking in here, and your comment that the market should decide on the parking requirements. We've heard a lot of people who live in the district who have as many cars as there are people living in a property. So in this area, how do you see that fitting based on the plans for the density when you may have a huge number of cars in an area that's not designed for a huge number of cars?
Well, by the market, I guess I mean the developer. If you're developing, let's call it a 5-story apartment block or a 3-story apartment block or even townhouses, to provide lots of parking is quite expensive. It's an opportunity cost. You're probably maybe even doing basement car parking, which requires a lot of money. So you're going to sort of figure out what the market, whatever the market is, needs and provide only that. You won't usually provide more. In fact, in my experience, I've seen lots of consents to breach car parking minimums. In fact, almost everyone I've processed for a big building has breached them. In terms of people owning cars, I don't know how that will work. If there's restricted on-street car parking and you've bought, say, an apartment with one car park, you're pretty much restricted to one car park. I don't foresee people walking, say, to Lake Hayes Estate for their car. That's awfully far. Maybe you join a car. There are car share sort of organizations, not here in Queenstown, but I have seen them work in big cities elsewhere. I don't really know how that'll work. It'll be interesting because it would be a really big shift for a lot of people in the district, to be honest.
I did wonder whether they would all go and park their cars overnight in the commercial area with all the spare car parks that are down there.
I don't know. Maybe. I mean, to be fair, I think council's also, which I've wondered about, talking about a park and ride at that big, the playing fields and stuff. They were originally. I think it's gone now. But if you put something in like that, I do wonder if that would be the same problem. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, just one other question I had. Just in relation to the park or the recreational area, you made a comment that it's shaded, it's probably not the best location. Was your comment in there really around the specificity of the location within the structure plan and needing more flexibility?
It's more that they've sort of identified these areas for parks and they've said they need these big parks, that's fine. But there's no flexibility in the plan provisions, although Mr. Brown's working on that. The plan provisions say that whatever comes in has to be in accordance with the structure plan. So if you say want to move the park 5 meters that way or 5 meters this way, or there's a road going straight through it and you wanted the park to be on this side of the road only, you would actually come in for non-complying activity and be contrary to that higher order provision. I don't think there's really that flexibility written into the plan.
It's being tweaked with, I think it's now, Mr. Brown will remind me, but generally consistent.
It's in the process of being tweaked, I think, would be the,
Thank you.
I think it was, no, wait on, here it is. Yes, it's one of the asterisks
Oh, yeah, cool. All right.
parts, yep. Sorry, Gillian. Oh, over to me. Just one question from me, and it's if we go to 40 as the 40 DPH, then the medium density zone, and realise not so much your issue, but for our looking at the variation as a whole, it means the high density zone has the same density requirement at present as the medium density zone. So therefore, from a planning perspective, if we were minded to do that and if we were minded to keep the medium density at 40, is it just one zone but with different height, setback or, different requirements?
Yeah, I mean,
As
I
a
think,
planner, is
I
it
think
more
that's
efficient?
one
at
approach. You
zone?
could do a maximum density there, but I think at the end of the day, the goal here is to maximize the use of this flat land on a major transportation corridor that has easy access to infrastructure. So I don't really see any issue with that, especially if you're going to have these bus, transport hubs. You could have higher buildings around the transport hub and not back, and the market will respond, I guess. Yeah, I think that's not a problem as long as the building envelope sort of reflects whatever council's hoping to achieve in terms of landscape protection and things like
And
that.
as a planner and experienced with this, you don't see any issue with removing, given those various controls that we've heard about and you've read, removing a potential maxima?
No, I don't think so. I think that I think you'll see medium density in the medium density, and you'll see, depending on the incentives and the building height in the market, you'll see some higher density in the high density. Especially around the commercial area, I think that will drive some higher buildings and some more density.
Thank you. I've got no more questions, but I'll just check whether anyone else has before we let you go. Thank you very much for your submissions and for the summary as well. That's very helpful and for coming today. Enjoy this lovely weather if you get to. You're probably off to another meeting. But,
I'm heading out to site now.
Thanks for
Thank
taking
you
the time
very
to listen
much.
to us. And,
Now, we'll adjourn. We're running a little bit late, but we'll adjourn now for morning tea and come back in about 10 minutes. Oh, we might have longer. Here we are. Good point. Because Mr. Copeland sent his apologies. Yep. Thank you. Thank you.
11:30.
So maybe,
11:15, 11:30 for Samuel Bell.
yep, he might be next. Oh, he might. He's an unknown. So we'll see.
Because I haven't heard anything, I'm pretty sure that he's probably not going to turn up.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. Yep.
My 15 minutes of fame.
Welcome back.
Yep.
And Mr. George is not here, so we'll skip straight to Mr. Belk.
That's correct.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And thank you for your submission. And please, in terms of your 15 minutes, use it as you wish, but as I've said to others this morning, you will have heard me, please especially focus on the key points for you.
Understood. My name is Samuel Belk. I'm a lay presenter, certainly not an expert in planning or urban development or subdivision. In spite of my North American accent, I arrived in the Lakes District 31 years ago, and we have been residents for 28 years and farm sheep, beef, and vines on Stronce Farm in Gibbston Valley, which was established in 1866. I'm a member of the Gibbston Community Association and have been its secretary and episodically its acting chair for 6 years. 28 years ago, when we bought our farm, we used Queenstown for almost everything we needed: post, machinery, shopping. However, with the advent of Hendo's Hole, which was a precursor to 5 Mile, traffic, Howard Patterson's development and subdivision, which is now Shotover Country, that all changed. We now avoid going to Queenstown because of the traffic and the depressing expansion and development and subdivision, tacky housing tracts and strip malls that are endemic to places like California, Texas, and New Jersey, places where I grew up and that I know well, places that once had open space and cornfields and are now housing tracts. Just as with those places, I believe we are and continue to surrender our landscape and open space to development and subdivision. I will not dwell on the hard facts of why we are fouling our own nest. They have been addressed and rebutted by experts like Mr. Brown's 260-page 42A document, which for lay residents and ratepayers like me is opaque and the logic is complex. Nor will I dwell on the fact that NZTA has suggested that Shotover Bridge, roading, and infrastructure cannot support the Ladies Mile housing tract of over 2,000 houses. The 42A document states, quote, "There will be minimization of generating additional vehicle trips along State Highway 6. The reduction, as far as practicable, of vehicle trips along State Highway 6 generated by the existing Ladies Mile communities, Lake Hayes Estate, Shotover Country Estate, and QCC. The discouragement of private vehicle use and the encouragement of active and public transport modes and avoidance of development until specific transport infrastructural works have been completed." How will that happen? What's the behavioral mode or adjustment that will take place? Surge charges? Toll booths? How will I get to Lorneville for livestock sales? As a lay person, I fail to see how traffic along State Highway 6 won't be exacerbated by the addition of a 2,500 house suburbia. This proposal simply creates a new town. 2,500 homes addresses nothing. Affordable housing, truly high-density housing, or the need for urban multifamily housing, such as Naitahu has initiated on the old high school site, and which I applaud. The developers have awarded 5% of the land to the Housing Trust, according to Mrs. Scott. 5% sounds to me like a bribe. And the other 95%, these homes will not cater to nurses, firemen, cops, teachers, but to second home buyers and overseas buyers. And the nurses, teachers, police, and firemen will commute from more affordable areas like Wanaka and Cromwell, or eventually Gibbston when that's subdivided. With the inconvenience, as well, of more traffic from the Ladies Mile development. I will not address that this is what I feel a sop to well-heeled developers who want to build and flip houses. They have the time and the resources to hire consultants to convince the council, from my perspective, that the earth is flat and that 2,500 homes on Ladies Mile will make perfect environmental, social, infrastructural, traffic, stormwater, and economic sense. I note that the stormwater is still an issue, although the 42A does not really address that, and has even been identified, I think, by Mr. Tim Church as a recurring problem. With regard to Lake Hayes, there will be runoff into Lake Hayes, and the past is prologue. Lake Hayes is eutrophic. It's a dead lake. The top 1 meter supports life 6 months out of the year. And I'm not quoting some social media site. I'm quoting Dr. Mark Schallenberg, who's New Zealand's premier limnologist, who teaches at Otago. The other person who spoke, John Alexander, I speak about this a lot because he runs the Lake Hayes Rowing, and he was New Zealand's premier rower in the 1970s, and we both comment on the changing colors of Lake Hayes. I won't dwell on the fact that the QLDC was originally against this housing tract, but that is now being fast-tracked through central government, which is mysterious. I'm not sure if that's due to the abject failure of some other housing projects like Kiwi Build. I won't dwell on those hard facts because there are experts to address those. But I do believe that because of my previous jobs and where I've lived, that my concerns, which are soft, qualitative, and global, merit discussion. First, our place in Asia. I'm acutely aware that Queenstown is a global destination. Our comparative destinations are not Taupo or Rotorua. Our comparatives are Chamonix, Aspen, Davos, Val d'Isere, Whistler, places like that. Whistler, where the Housing Trust was modeled on, courtesy of previous councillor John MacDonald. I know all of those places very well. My professional career for a very long time was in finance, and most of it spent in Tokyo. 11 years. Try telling somebody in Tokyo that an apartment is unattractive and the apartment is not a nice place to live, as it's unsaleable. I lived in a city of 30 million people. If we build apartments in high-density housing, they will get filled. I know how desirable and unique Queenstown is to all of North Asia. If you go 4 time zones west, northern and southern hemispheres, there are no comparatives. We are one of the last places with open space and clean air. Why do we want to put up a housing tract of 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes? As far as housing, we still believe in an out-of-date national ideal that we need to provide everyone, including new semi-skilled entrants, with a Section 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. We will use up our remaining limited land in the Lakes region, clinging to a parochial and provincial housing ideal that is not available anywhere else in Asia. I lived in an apartment for 11 years in Tokyo. New entrants to the lakes can live in high-density multifamily housing. And I want to digress and address Commissioner Moore's comment that the average house in Queenstown in the Lakes region is 1.7 million. It is. And at current FX rates, that's barely over $1 million US, and that's really cheap on a global scale. If we think about ourselves as a global destination, it's incredibly cheap. You can walk through any trading room or bank in North Asia, and people will be sitting there with Harcourt's things open, and they'll be buying these houses, and these will be second homes for overseas buyers and for expat Kiwis. We have an outstanding landscape full of ONLs and ONFs. We are designated under the National Policy Statement as HPL 3, Highly Productive Land Class 3. Or I'm sorry, the 42A addresses the Ladies Mile area, which used to be owned by Grant and Sharon Stalker, who leased our land for deer farming. It states that it is, quote, vacant rural land with limited productive and rural activities. Well, for a lot of people, that describes every farm in New Zealand, mine as well. A lot of people driving along the road look at an open paddock and think that it's unproductive. Landscape is built on views and open space. It is in direct conflict with housing tracts and apartment blocks. We don't know how to value open space. If you believe in efficient market hypothesis, which I can go into at length because I was taught by 3 Nobel laureates, we don't value open space. We don't know what the dollar value of it is, but it's far too cheap. And that's the reason why this is so attractive. There are hundreds of examples globally. The most jarring for me was a recent visit to the Central Valley of California, which used to be open pasture and farms. It is now one big housing tract for miles and miles. Cookie-cutter identical McMansions separated from each other by no more than a meter. A one-way commute to the jobs in the Bay Area is 2 hours. Is this what we want for the Lakes region? We already have a shopping mall and strip mall at 5 Mile, the successor to Hendo's Hole. Do we really want to extend this tacky development further? Queenstown's future. We risk, with this development and those like it, incrementally fouling our nest further. If we truly want to preserve the attractiveness of the region for both residents and visitors, we need to be much more thoughtful about any further development. We can approve the Ladies Mile development and others like it, and each one will be a small incremental change. It's the boiled frog syndrome. But cumulatively, we will lose the Lakes region to development. We are losing it already. It is less attractive, much more crowded, and much more developed than when my wife and I crested the Crown Range on a dirt road in 1991. There is a price to live in the Lakes region. It's expensive to live here. We are a global destination. We need to preserve what is left of our landscape. And the Ladies Mile development should be dramatically shrunk or better not approve, but I know that that's not going to happen. If you really want transparency and input, run a lakes-wide referendum on the Ladies Mile development. See how the lay people like me, the ratepayers, the great unwashed, vote. I think the outcome of the referendum would be obvious, which is exactly why there will be no referendum. Because this development appears to be a fait accompli, and a layperson, as a ratepayer, I might as well be trying to roll boulders uphill or tilt at windmills. My good friend John Alexander, who presented earlier, told me, don't speak too freely or you'll get hammered with a code of conduct violation, so I hope that's not going to happen. I hope I have not transgressed. Thank you for my time.
You have absolutely no code of conduct applying to you, so as long as it's not offensive, you can say whatever you feel like. It's your time.
All right.
Just firstly, Mr. Belk, you read from a piece of paper.
Yep.
Could we please, through Shelley, the hearing administrator, get a copy of that?
Here you go.
Perfect, thank you. Shelley will get that later.
Yep.
I'll just check if there's any questions from the panel. There's one from Ian.
Hi, Mr. Belk.
Yep.
Thank you for that. I've been living in Auckland, but coming to Queenstown for work pretty frequent. Well, putting aside that COVID blip, something between 4 to 8 weeks of the year, or sometimes more. So I don't live here, but I suspect I have a perspective similar to someone who has a holiday home here, and I've seen a fair bit. And accepting a lot of decisions have been made and things happen, and some things work out the way they'd been hoped and some didn't. I've seen a lot of that change too. And just in terms of your suggestion that high density housing in central Queenstown would be helpful, I just want to test that a little bit with you. From the point of view of what I've seen over the last 15 odd years with the emergence of the development out at the airport, has been a sort of Queenstown centre become...
Are we talking Mangere or are we talking Queenstown?
It's Queenstown.
Okay.
Queenstown. Has been a sort of evolution of Queenstown Central as a more tourist hotel service hub, and the the living part more out towards Frankton. And we had the Catholics yesterday telling us they've got a plan to actually close their central school here in Queenstown and develop land out at Ladies Mile. Of course, the high school's moved from town out to by the airport. And so I just want to test with you, if Frankton is where the people that live here, you're the great unwashed, as you totally inappropriately referred to yourself as.
Hoi polloi, Untermensch, whatever, yeah.
But if Frankton's where those people want to live, is trying to put more housing in central Queenstown really the right thing, or is it actually about somehow high density housing out at Frankton, where the schools are moving to and where the shops for the locals seem to be happening? Or have I just got it wrong?
No, I don't. Look, I'm sure you know much more about this than I do. From me, as someone who has been in the area or back and forth to the area, and for a long time I was also, if you want, a commuter from offshore. Let me flip that on its head. Queenstown is not affordable. So not by planning, but by evolution, by increments, we have developed the airport site. We have developed Frankton. And we've developed it because it's cheaper. Is it more attractive? I don't think it's attractive. It hasn't got a view of the lake. This does have a view of the lake. And again, I'm not a planner or an urban planner, but why not adopt some things like take place in France or Germany, where you have high density housing in small towns, and then rural areas are zoned as rural areas. And you can't subdivide. And maybe I should be taxed for my open space. I have to thank developers because I've done 3 land purchases, and I don't like purchasing land, but it's always been to stop a developer. Way back in the Nevermind in the 1990s, you may remember John Reed and Simon Saville, who were trying to develop Walter Peak into some sort of a retirement home. We bought land next to us from Naitahu because they were going to subdivide it. We bought other land because some rather infamous types named Tim Edney and David Henderson were going to subdivide that. The only reason I buy land is to preserve open space, so I have money I'm betting with my own money, with whatever I can raise. I believe that open space and open land and pastoral farming, viticultural farming, horticultural farming is undervalued.
Thank you for that. What I'll just let you know is that your comment about the amenity and the lake views you get here, we've had a number of professional economics witnesses also tell us that apartments really need to be where the amenity is. So there
Really what?
need to be where the amenity is. So we have had experts that have actually given similar sentiments as you, just so you know.
Right. But if I've got to look at 10-story buildings, I'd rather look at 10-story buildings in downtown Queenstown as an urban center than out in what used to be Grant Stalker's deer paddock.
Understood. Thanks a lot for your time.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
Julie?
I have one. Thanks.
You can be next, Julie. Yeah, thank you.
And I think you were the first submitter in front of us to talk about the MPS, highly productive land.
Yep.
And I took the opportunity to reread the strategy last week, knowing that we had been to Threepwood and the discussions they'd had about the flat paddocks being used to create a pumping station. And just wanted to get an understanding from yourself, because under the RMA these need to be given serious consideration, and you touched on it, but I thought there might have been some more you would want to add to the loss of that area, because I've looked at it when we were up on Slope Hill, and what I saw along there were a few horses, maybe the odd cattle beast, not what, when I'm looking at highly productive land, normally would be.
No, and you can call those lifestyle blocks or what have you. I mean, I like to think that I'm not a lifestyle block because I've, ultra-fine wool, and so therefore I actually make money on wool, unlike the rest of New Zealand. But there is and I don't want to get into the tax code, but there is very little way for those people to actually sequester that land economically and efficiently. Overseas, you have things like current use and conservation easement, which we would be able to do. Here, you only have QE2 trust. For our land, my only avenue to sequester it, to ring fence it, is the QE2 trust. But what I'm not even proposing that this 120 or 170 acre parcel be put in QE2 trust. But in fact, I am. It's the entryway. Do we really want to put housing blocks there? Do we really want to turn that into a subdivision? And yes, you're correct. Could that land be farmed more intensively? Yeah, very likely. Certainly, could I make a lot more money by subdividing 50 or 100 acres? I could make a lot of money. Do I want to do that? No. When I arrived here 35 years ago, I was told that I should strip mine it because there were 4 grams of gold per ton, and that a strip mine, they would put the whole paddock right back. But this is human nature, and we evolve into new modes of doing things as we start to value open space. Sorry.
No, good. Thanks very much.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bjork. Now, our next submitter is Mr. Victor. Ah, lovely. Perfect.
You're running early. That's good.
We're running, 15 minutes early, so that's very good.
I was lucky I got here. Oh, great. I'll let me know when you're ready.
We're in your hands.
Okay.
So we've got your submission, and we've got also the lay evidence statement that you provided.
Okay.
So you've got 15 minutes.
Great.
So please, I've been saying to everyone else, the most useful thing for us is if you just focus on the key points that you want to get across. And then that way it makes sure we get through everything in 15 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. I will try to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time as well to listen to me. I know it's a huge task you've got, and even for the public, holy smoke, I mean, there's so much to try and keep track of, and it's impossible because I work 7 days a week, so
Yep.
so I hope I haven't missed anything too much here. Well, anyway, as you see in my lay evidence, I'm a resident of Lake Hayes Estate. I've been part of the community for 11 years, and I've been in the tourism industry for 25 years. And I just think it's a huge mistake to rezone this land as anything from rural. I think it needs to stay as rural. It's the gateway into Queenstown. It's just the wrong location to be putting such intensive development. We're talking 10,000 people, 8 to 10,000 people. That is going to put such a chokehold on that highway. Everyone really lives in this area, Arrowtown, through down to the Shotover River, for the purpose of, they want to go into Queenstown, they want to go over that bridge for work, for school, for events, to enjoy the lake, the skiing, everything's that direction, and we are going to be trapped on the other side of the bridge if this goes ahead, is how I see it. We also had the QLDC survey as well, back, would have been a year or two ago now, with 86% of the community against the development. I mean, that's a huge amount of people, and I think around 6% were undecided, so you only had, an 8% also actually for it. Anyway, coming up with the 42A report as well, a lot of it was not so focused on the traffic, and that is really the key concern of the community and a lot of people in Queenstown as well. It's, we want to be able to get around the area freely. We have lots of issues getting out of Lake Hayes Estate and Shotover Country because there's only one road in and out. It's very, very difficult for us to function at the moment, but with this many more people getting added to the mix, it's just going to pretty much be a roadblock to get out. You're going to almost want everyone to be working from home and not doing a 9-to-5 job. Tony Pickard's evidence said he suggested a roundabout at Howard's Drive, and another solution was a bus lane. But I mean, we can't get out of the estate to use the bus lane. That's how bad it is. You're on the bus, you're sitting on it for 40 minutes or more sometimes before you can even get onto the highway. And then a bus lane is 750 metres, if you're lucky, along the front of the country club and down to the bridge. So the bus has got to get out of a one-lane exit with all the other cars, turn left into the bus lane, and then it's going to have to re-merge again at the bridge. So it's just going to compound everything still. Plus we've got 8 to 10,000 more people with cars, most likely. I mean, I know the council's trying to say that they only want allowing for one car park per 2-bedroom apartment, but and realistically, that apartment's going to have 4 people in it, not 2 people. So 4 people and they're going to want 4 cars. There's a lot of tradies, there's a lot of people that rely on their vehicles to get around, and you can't expect them to be taking a bus or a scooter with all their tools. And if you see the traffic on the road, it's so many are in construction, but we've got plenty of tourists, thousands of tourists and rental cars come through normally in summer. We've got all the commuters from Cromwell, Alexandra, Wanaka. They all come through to use Queenstown Airport for appointments, that sort of thing. There's just going to be a lot of economic impacts on there for missed flights and missed appointments, lost money from all those things. Let me see where I'm up to. I think I've covered that, but well, I mean, we've had situations in the past as well with students taking the school bus to high school, and they've missed exams because they've been stuck in the traffic We've had people from the community tell us that at the community association meetings, and it's, you know, that sort of thing. You can't. It's only going to get worse, is what I keep saying, and I just don't think, you know, this is the right way to go. We've got other land near the high school in Frankton, the new high school. It's undeveloped land, which would be perfect for people to be living near the high school. No need for a car, just walk to school. You know, there's a bus and the airport all within walking distance of that, and all the supermarkets, all the infrastructure. I just check what else we had. And just based on, as well as a tourism industry person, we have a lot of challenges getting our groups from hotels to activities, all the tours, out to dinners, things like that. It's getting ever increasingly hard. We've had a lot of comments now from our guests. Most of them are from America, and they're escaping their big cities to come to Queenstown to relax. And this is the jewel of New Zealand. This is the jewel of the world. It's an incredible place. And they're coming here and saying, I'm not feeling relaxed. We've been stuck in traffic for an hour, and now we've missed our tour, we've missed our lunch. It's just a really unpleasant experience for them. So we're seeing that now. They're commenting and saying we might choose a different destination next time. And normally the comment we get is, we can't wait to come back. We can't wait to bring our family, our friends over next time. And really what I've kind of to sum up is really, you know, what is the backup plan if this high density development cripples Queenstown? It can't be undone. And hoping for a modal shift is unrealistic. I think it's, you know, we get freezing cold temperatures, ice, snow in the winter. You cannot expect people to be taking a bike or a scooter in that sort of weather. I know there's buses proposed, but we still need to get those buses out of the estates. And at the moment, they just can't, you know, there's so much traffic coming in and out, and ever increasing traffic commuting from those other satellite towns, Wanaka, Cromwell, Alexandra. Okay, I think that's all I need to say. Okay, I could go on forever, and I've been fighting this for 8 years, since 2015 when it first got zoned as a special housing area. So it's just not, you know, I just see it as being the worst place possible when we've only got a one-lane bridge in each direction to get people across. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just conscious of time, we've got time for a few questions.
Sure.
So, Judith.
Thanks for coming in. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Just interested in what you were saying around development out at the new high school. In your view, would be a good idea because people can just walk to school and you don't have the issue of driving.
Yeah.
So part of the Ladies' Mile variation is to allow for a new high school, a new primary school, and also a commercial area in the supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that will be of benefit in helping the existing traffic problems, particularly sort of the Lake Hayes, Shotover country area?
I think it may help in a way, but then we still have the building traffic that's going to be coming along that road still. That it might cut down on a drive to the supermarket, but then people still want choice and they still want to go maybe to a different supermarket and may not be, you know, the one they want to go to, or it might not have what they need. It's still going to involve people leaving Lake Hayes Estate or Shotover Country to go across State Highway 6 to get to that supermarket though, so we've still got there's still thousands of car movements crossing that road, using those roundabouts, giving way to their right. You know, it's going to still be a big impact, I think. It may help somewhat, but I think very small.
So I don't know if you've been following the live streaming, or you have far more important things to do, I'm sure. One of the things that's been talked about with NZTA and Council on the transport side is that they're now looking at putting in signals instead of roundabouts. Do you think that would help?
I heard something about that. Signals at the Howard's Drive.
At Howard's Drive to Highway 6, so it gives everybody their own turn rather than having to wait for a gap in traffic.
Yeah. Would there also be a traffic controlled roundabout at Shotover Country, or is that going to stay as a roundabout?
So there'll be signals at Howard's Drive, there'll be signals at Stalker Road. So both of those existing intersections would have signals, and then the intersection to the east that doesn't exist now would be a roundabout.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to know. It's hard to know. And I think another thing I wanted to say actually was that really, if it does go ahead, and I really hope it doesn't, but if it does, I think before the construction happens, this roading needs to be all in place, functioning, so we can see it actually working, because if development goes ahead first, we can't tweak things after that. If we see the road working well with those lights, and it seems to be the solution, wonderful. But I really don't know if that is going to be the case. I mean, how long are the phases going to be? You know, how long is the tailback going to be each time? There's so many questions, and I think that has to be the first thing that's done first is sort out that traffic. Like the previous mayor said, he did not support it until a solution was found, a functioning solution. And I hope the new mayor is saying the same thing. And
what may give you some comfort is that the signalisation of Howard's Drive and State Highway 6 is intended to be started next year.
Okay.
That will be in advance of development. There are also provisions in the district plan that limit or basically say you can't occupy any development until certain transport infrastructure is in place. So that was all the questions I had for you. Thank you.
No, that's great to hear.
Oh, good. I'm glad. But I do appreciate you coming in, and it's really good to get sort of an experiential view rather than just the expert view. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Got time for one quick question if anyone has one. No,
I'm good, thanks.
No, I'm good too, thank you. And your submission layers over a number of other submitters and submissions that we've heard from Lake Hayes and Shotover, including the Community Association as well. So thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you so much. I don't want to come through as really, I am upset about it, but I understand you, and you all have a hard job to do and a hard decision to make, and I appreciate it. And it's a very fast process, I think, and it's very hard to keep track of. Yep. And I think a lot of people might even just, give up sometimes because it's like, I don't have that much time commitment, and I don't have a chance to keep track of it. And so I'm glad a lot of people have still showed up.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. And if you were reading from something you'd prepared, could you please just send that to Shelley?
Oh, sure, actually.
If it was purely just notes, that's fine.
Yeah, and it was pretty much the same as the
Exactly, we've
submission.
got this as well.
It
was just
trying to pick things out of it.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Now, our next submitter is Mr. Hillhorst.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Kia ora. This is your last day, and I appreciate you've been at this now for some weeks, and so you must be looking forward to the end of that. Maybe this is a good time to look at this, I would say, left field suggestion that we've got. You're going, my God, where did this come from? We're dealing with traffic and all of these sorts of things, understandably. But what is this Flight Plan 2050 group on about? So I plan to speak for a couple of minutes, and then I'm inviting questions because you will have read, and I think, a reasonably comprehensive reports from us. So just if I could say, first let me introduce Flight Plan. Our group started in 2018. It was to do with the Queenstown Airport noise boundaries, then the Queenstown Airport Master Plan, and then the Frankton Flats Master Plan commissioned by Council, the Boffa-Miskell Master Plan. So that was our genesis. We had public meetings in 2019, about 300 people turning up, COVID sort of shut down those conversations. There was no point us going and saying move the airport when the thing was closed and everybody wanted it to open. So, and now we're going through the process of becoming an incorporated society, because we've had quite a number of people from in Wanaka, Hawea, Tawera, Cromwell and Alex contacting us and saying, look, we've got no voice. There's a whole lot of people against the proposals. And could you guys, do you have a membership? Can we join? And we haven't had a membership. We've really just been a group of people. So that's an in-process thing. So our purpose is to advocate for the Central Lakes future airport infrastructure to ensure it best promotes the whole region's future wellbeing. So we're no longer focused on, hey, let's use Frankton Flats for the obvious thing. I think I sent you a diagram. A lot of your things would be solved if you could kind of go, hey, let's build in there and put 30,000 people in the middle of what is the spokes of urban development that are going around it. Wouldn't that make a sensible 15-minute city? So we think that will naturally fall out of a national conversation. And so we've moved to let's having a national conversation, and that's our kaupapa. So our submission asks you to retain the future potential of Ladies Mile. Could at some stage in the future be adapted to serve as a runway during civil emergencies such as the AF8? Now we're very, very conscious of the issues that you're facing. Frankton, like we have population growth 8% last year, and we're talking about residential population. Put aside the visitor growth, because maybe the destination management plan, maybe climate change and flights and all that sort of stuff, that's a different question. But people move to this district, and we've been here myself 32 years. In year 2000 under Mayor Clive Geddes, we did a whole bunch of workshops. We put hard urban boundaries at the Shotover River. Can you imagine that? Nobody would be living in the Eastern Corridor, and Jack's Point had not yet started. So like, we've seen a lot of growth. We had no supermarkets. This place is ballistic. Now, we come from the position of recognising that that is like one of the inevitabilities that you face. And for all of the things that I recognise, yeah, we love the open space and stuff like this, the development you're talking about really only deals to about 10 years of future growth, because we're expecting an additional 30,000 by 2050, and you're catering for about 10. Okay, so we recognise that's an issue. We think that the natural and normal development going forward would be to say we need urban density somewhere, and the middle of Frankton Flats is the obvious place to put it. You've got very clear transport and public transport links. You stop this disconnected centres thing and start saying there's an urban hub of 30, 40,000 people living here, and everybody is now in a very straight line, sort of 5-minute, 20-minute cycle from it. So that's kind of really obvious planning if we have the courage to look to a blue sky, look forward. Now, how likely is it? Well, studies for alternative places for the airport, the council had 3 years of looking at this in 87 and 88. That's some time ago. Again in 95, before the jets were introduced, they're going, well, nobody will tolerate jets, so maybe we need to relocate the airport, and some serious work were done. We're talking about 100-page studies, the sort of things that you guys are looking at, maybe not as intense as this. So there's been a past appetite for it. We believe there will be a future appetite for it. We believe that the Central Otago Airport proposal at least gives us a platform for a conversation that is easier than saying from scratch, nobody's going to want to move the airport because they can't see where it'll go. Well, as we see that potentially it could go, and as we move this discussion into the national arena, we're going to find that it starts a little bit like Ports of Auckland. It's going to start going, something has to be done. And we need, So the question is, are we going to retain that as a potential? Like, we're not asking you to build a runway or do anything like that. In fact, our proposal, we believe, we're talking about an existing restricted building area. We're not asking you to take away rights that people already have. No, that's not the conversation. And all we're doing is saying, please leave it there. It's a little uncertain what the plan is, because the different maps that we have here, one has like a break in it happening here, and the other one has it going right through, and these are published in the same document, the 49 report or whatever it was. So it's a little unclear, but fundamentally you're taking away 50 metres, and that's a crucial 50 metres. And you're also, if you endorse the master plan, going, let's make it an avenue of trees. Now, this would sabotage the opportunity of putting, in the future, a runway, emergency runway, like when it's necessary, Hercules planes flying, and there are 45 planes already in Australasia that could be using that, because we recognise an AF8 would be right across the South Island, but this would be a priority zone. So that's the question. Do you want that as a future option? The future urban, maybe it's not going to be in 5 years or 10 years. Potentially it could be. If Christchurch got the go-ahead, and within a 5-year time frame we're looking at, for them to have got the consent, a year or so for them to decide to go for consents, another 3 years through this sort of process, and then they've got, let's say, a 3-year build. It's conceivable within a 7, 8, 9, 10 year time frame that they could put planes on the ground at Central Otago, or they could hold that option off for further. So it's actually a near-term conversation we should be having, but potentially it's 80 years from now, you know, when you've done Ladies Mile, and then, well, you've lost a whole bunch of Jack's Point because they've taken, put it into QE2, where else in the basin are you going to go? Once we've played that game for a long time, and I imagine the transport network will be like tearing itself in shreds, we will have that conversation. Should we protect that ability? That's what we're asking, and we're asking you to consider seriously. And we believe it could be done at no cost to the urban density of roughly 10,000 people you could put into that zone. So that's our kind of position in summary. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. And your submission and your presentation then are very clear. So thank you for being very simple. Although you provided us with lots of material, you've been very clear and straightforward as to what you're asking for. So thank you very much. It makes our job a lot easier rather than trying to sift through and find what the issues are. Any questions from the panel? Judith?
I do have a couple of questions. I just want to make sure I'm understanding what the question is of us. And it's around the potential future use of State Highway 6 as an emergency runway. Yeah. So are you envisaging that when it will be needed, or that there will be any change to the road to allow for that? Or are you seeing is it in its current form would provide that potential emergency
Clearly
runway?
not in its current form, or in the form that you would result in, because you're going to put in lampposts and all those sorts of things that are a natural part of a road. But the point is, once a decision is made, and that's not part of this conversation, you're going to put in street lights, and you're going to put whatever you're going to put in as it is. But at a future time when it's decided, all of those things would be designed so that they could adapt reasonably quickly. And we've had engineers go through a process. So, for example, lampposts can go down reasonably quickly, and they could be designed to go down by simple hand operation rather than any mechanical operations. Currently, we've got roundabouts. They could be sitting on concrete slabs with skid planes built as pizzas that a simple car with a tow bar could pull a single slice out to the side. So the point is, the road could be engineered and designed in a way that would easily, within an 8-hour period, be adaptable so that planes could, and sufficiently so that every 3 or 5 years you might run an exercise where those planes come in. As we have the C7 from Australia come and land in Queenstown Airport, that's a jet-powered Hercules. So they do like training every so many years. They'll fly over here and fly into the various airports that they need to do. So we could imagine that. This is maybe the only opportunity we've got of that. It's perfectly located because you can actually build a network of road. You can use the road system of the basin and get around without that section, because you can run up, shot over country in that emergency circumstance. You could imagine that once everything's pulled aside, you can have planes land and then cars can use it again. You've got potentially school grounds and hospital right adjacent, so you've got body of the supply logistics and all those sorts of things that sit and are required. The helicopter landing spaces are all possible there.
That's actually helped my understanding a lot, because I was scratching my head about the streetlights and power poles at the moment. So thank you for your answer. Appreciate that.
Singapore has, I think, 3 of their highways. The one that you would take from the middle of Singapore to the airport, you'll notice that there's a long section of there that the trees in the middle of the road are sitting in huge, great pots. And that's because they've got it designed that they just go and push those pots to the side and their military aircraft can land there. So they have, I think, 3 parts of their highway system on that little island, which they can convert pretty easily.
Thank you.
Thank you. Poloni.
No questions, thanks very much.
Gillian?
No questions, thank you.
Ian?
No questions, but I'm very familiar with the Singapore examples you
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and again, thank you just for being so, to my reading and things, very clear, very straightforward.
You will have, I believe, Mr. Singh from QIC
Yes.
speaking at length, as you might expect, this afternoon. QIC is not at all interested in pursuing these sorts of things, and there was a question that Mr. Brown raised, how come these people aren't thinking about it? Well, some of these people don't think further ahead, and they have their own self-interest as an entity that they're pursuing. So, no, I think they would be looking at all sorts of ways they could actually shut this idea down rather than help it develop. So I just mention that too.
Wonderful. Thank you, and thank you for coming in today, doing the submission and presenting to us, taking time out of your day.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Well, we'll adjourn now for lunchtime, and we'll start back at 1:30, so it will be a slightly longer lunch than normal. And we will have the Merry Hill Limited presentation at 1:30, so we'll break until then.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.